Sometimes we come across people in life that have really lived life fully. In fact, they may have started as a Kansas farm boy, and then they've grown up to be launching rockets into space. Today, our guest is Ward Schraeder, and we're going to learn about what it takes to become an entrepreneur in your heart, mind, and body.
The doctor and a musician walk into a bar and start talking about frequency, tone, life, and the abundance of it all. And with an explosion of collective thought, the Chadcasters are born.
Here we are, another podcast. You ready, Chad?
I'm ready. Good morning.
Great. Let's get going. Let's start off with a little introduction of our guest. Now, Ward, I did research on you, trying to learn more of your background, and I realized I was going to do a poor job. And I want to kind of set the stage and then let you describe a little bit of your history to us, because I won't do it credit. You were born Western Kansas.
Yes.
On a farm.
Yes.
And today you live in the Kansas City area.
I do.
Now, that's a big gap. Why don't you walk us through those first years of your life up until the point when maybe you went to college?
Okay. My dad was a small farmer, 500 acres in western Kansas, south of Hayes, about 40 miles. Went through a period when there was a serious drought, and not an unusual thing. 7 years without a crop, and became a school teacher because he was going to lose the farm, and so he became my science and math teacher all through high school, and from there I was heavily influenced by all of that. Not particularly interested in the traditional studies of English and history and those things as a kid. And so I went to college. I took my degree in chemistry and math from Fort Hays State University. And all of the getting there, I worked my way. I started working at 11. My godparents lived about 2 miles away, had also a 500-600 acre farm and a small dairy operation. And I started milking cows and driving tractor and whatever I could do at 11 in kind of half day. And then I think at 12 or 13, I started working 8-10 hour days and spent thousands of hours on a tractor. And that's why you're going to have to yell at me sometimes because I'm half deaf now. And
What's that?
Yeah, exactly. But enjoyed every bit of it. Learned the gratification of earning what you get. And learn that not everything, be wise in what you do, be thoughtful. I think one of the best things that happened to me at that period in life was I had so much time alone on a tractor. I spent it doing math in my mind.
Really?
And just like the tractor was going 3 miles an hour and the plow I was pulling was 8 foot wide, and the field was 2,000 feet across and 3,000 feet long. And how many times was I going to go around that thing before I got done? And it made me quite good at math. And in my whole life, a little beyond college, as I started into business, I was able to do the math in my head when I was negotiating something with someone to buy, to sell, whatever. I knew before the conversation went a few words what my margin of profit would be or not, and I'm still quite good at that.
So, Chad, you're from just a stone's throw, relative Western Kansas terms, you're just a stone's throw away from where
Colby.
he's at.
Oh, yeah.
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 I used to go to Salina to buy guitars.
From
SM Hansen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's who taught me my first guitar lesson.
Was it really?
Yeah, Steve
Nice.
Hansen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, a lot. I had 3 brothers, a mother and father. Father was born on the ranch in what at that time was a garage, or in my life was a garage. It had been the house where he and his 2 sisters were raised. wasn't much bigger than the working area of your office, Chad.
Yeah.
And but we never had any extra money, but we never went hungry. It's always been my children and grandchildren were always amazed when my dad was alive. I don't think my dad ever told me that he loved me, or anybody else, but you never doubted it. You didn't have to be told, and it's something I kind of abstained from saying I love this, I love that, because it cheapens the word, and in my opinion, deeds are more important than or actions, deeds are more important than words.
One of the things that you just brought up that I don't know a lot of our listeners, if they actually understand the impact of a drought on a farmer. I remember my grandma telling me about the Dust Bowl and, what went on during the Depression. And those things, that's more than having a bad week or a bad day at work. Or, you know what? I lost my job. Now I'm going to file unemployment and, I'm going to have to find another job within the next 6 months or it'll run out. And I'm not saying that it's not inappropriate to have a system to help people when rough times come. But during, if you're a farmer and you're depending on the land, that teaches you a deep resolve. I mean, you dig deep, you believe clearly in what you're doing. And because when your dad was teaching, he probably didn't quit working the land.
Oh, no, he was still farming, raising cattle.
Of course.
Drought. Today, just like every other social program that's out there, farmers have a social program, and it's called crop insurance, and it's 80 or 90% paid for by the federal government, and so any farmer that isn't really large that can afford to take the losses of no crop buys the insurance. If you're diverse and big enough, maybe you don't need to, but most farmers aren't. And back in the day when my dad was in that situation, there wasn't anything such as crop insurance. So when we had a drought, Western Kansas is around our area of our farm, and I'm fourth generation owner of the homestead.
Yeah, you still have it.
I still have it. I've increased the size of it, and my great grandfather homesteaded the first quarter of land. So I'm proud of that, and trying to make it so that my children can take it over, and they'll be a fifth generation, and hopefully beyond that. But we average about 23 inches of rainfall a year. In those 7 years, there was maybe 10 to 14 inches of rain a year. The methods of farming were completely different than today. They turned the soil regularly. They plowed every year. And all of those things even dry out the soil even more, which is what helped cause the Dust Bowl that you mentioned. But today's methods are much better. We don't turn the soil, and they're better and worse. And we use chemicals to kill weeds instead of turning them over and killing them. But anyway, he didn't get a crop. The wheat was 10 inches tall, and the head was an inch, and it wasn't worth cutting. And so there was zero income. The only income he had was from cattle and from milking. Back then, a milk truck would come around every week, and you would milk cattle, and you had these 5-gallon pails, and you would keep them in a cellar where it was cool, and you'd separate the cream, take it to town, sell it to the grocery stores. And we traded, even as a kid, we traded our services for products that we couldn't produce on the farm, like clothing. If you needed a pair of jeans, you could literally take 24 eggs to town and trade them for a pair of jeans.
The barter system has its merits, doesn't it?
Oh, it does.
One of the most amazing things that I tell everybody about it, the question is do you know what counter checks are? And we used to have counter checks all over Western Kansas, and that was where every business had a series of checks from every local bank with no numbers on them, no name. And when I went into the grocery store and I bought something, I'd just take the checkbook that was from my bank and I'd write a check. No register either. And drove my wife crazy when we got married, because I was used to just keeping mentally track of my checkbook, how much I'd spent and how much, and our banker, his name was Danny, and when I'd get overdrawn, he'd call me, and I'd sell a calf or whatever I had to do, and send him some money, and then I'd do it again, and that drove her insane.
Can you imagine banking like that today, Chad?
No, I couldn't. But I remember all this.
Do you?
Oh, yeah.
You're old enough to remember?
I remember counter checks, and yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Colby would have had it. It was an honor system, and if you failed the honor system and your check came back, the retailer would hang it on the cash register.
Yeah.
And when you walked through, I'd see that Chad had a bounced check. And if I'm running another business, I'm like, maybe I'm not going to take a check from Chad.
Yeah.
So it was an embarrassment, and you just didn't let it happen.
My first guitar from SM Hansen, I went to my bank in Colby and to get a loan. Bought a
really?
guitar. And
Oh my gosh.
he's like, well, and I'm not even out of high school, and he's like, well, what do you have for collateral? I was like, well, I don't have anything. And he goes, do you have anybody co-sign? I was like, no, I don't have that. And he goes, well, I don't think I can do anything. I'm like, well, but I mean, I've got a show this weekend and I really need this. And we went back and forth, and he's like, okay, we can do this. Come back Monday. Well, I kind of need to drive to Salina like right now to go get this.
Well, if you didn't have a guitar and you were trying to buy one, how did you have a
I had one
play?
that broke. Yeah, I had one that broke that was not in good shape anymore, and all of a sudden I was in a situation, and I walked out of there with $1,000 from that.
Oh my gosh, that was a big guitar. That was a fancy guitar.
After about 3 go-rounds with him, and went to Salina.
Oh, but
they won't do that now.
Yeah.
No,
they won't do
really?
that.
Really?
No.
Well, that had to form a lot of background for you, a foundation that you used to grow from. So you went to Fort Hays, got your degree, and then what? Now, I think you also were welding during that time. Is that correct?
I was. I learned how to crudely weld on the farm, and because we fixed everything. We didn't. I don't ever remember taking a tractor in to have it worked on. Even most of the time, if we just couldn't figure it out, we'd take it to the dealer of our cars. But most of the time, we did it all ourselves.
So arc or wire?
Arc.
Arc, nice.
Yeah. It was awful. But I went to college, and a junior college in Dodge City to start with. And there was a company called WW Manufacturing, and they had a job where they paid you by the piece. So if I could make one a day, I made X dollars. If I could make 100, I made X plus. And I took it, and it was all welding, and it was making cattle chutes and parts for handling cattle. And it didn't take very long, and I became pretty decent at welding and fast, and was making 2 or 3 times the money that any of my counterparts in college were making. I was living high on the hog. And I went from that to structural welding and a little bit of fabrication. And from that point on, I always had a job. Anytime a skill like that, I could go anywhere. When I went to Hayes, I had a job within a day because everybody needed a welder.
Well, you bring up something there that I think that a lot of people today go to college that shouldn't go to college, but they need a trade because you can always use a trade.
Absolutely. I am, for a long time, I thought college was the way to get started. To me, college is a method to learn how to be an employee, not to be an independent businessman and an entrepreneur. And so I haven't been successful yet, but I keep trying to convince my grandchildren, get a trade. In 3 to 5 years, learn it well. And if you don't understand how to get into business for yourself, I'll help you. And I'll get you started into business. We'll incorporate